Hey everyone, it's Alex and welcome to the Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. If you're not subscribed, consider hitting the subscribe button so you can keep up to date with future content. I would really appreciate it. If you haven't hit the like button either, why don't you hit it while you're there? That being said, let's get started with deck number 1. We got top 10 and we got some new ones out here. Let's talk about Dark Junk. That's right, Dark Junk. Love the name, going with it. And we got here an Annihilus deck. It is an Annihilus deck, and Annihilus decks lately have been running Alioth. The ability to play Alioth on turn 6 when you play Annihilus on turn 5 in order to basically secure the game, right? There's a lot of chances where if you kick over the Sentry's Void, they're really not going to be contesting in that location, so you have a better 50-50 opportunity with Alioth, so Alioth is starting to make its way back into these decks. So we're doing this as a Zabu based deck, so naturally with Zabu you have the Darkhawk based package and Shang-Chi. Truer than ever, if you're someone that's trying to rank up, if you see Zabu, always assume Shang-Chi is in the deck. The two are going together hand in hand in almost every single list that runs Zabu, so please bear that in mind. The Shadow King tech is really interesting here for the anti-destroy factor, and of course you do have the Black Widow, which is really good into just disrupting your opponent again, adding some junk on their board. Regardless, 55% win rate and a pretty modest cube rate at 0.25, a little lower than perhaps we would like, but still, that's what puts it on the top 10, but not that deep into it. Going to number 9, here we got Chonky Scar. This is a relatively new deck that's making some waves in the meta. I'm not even sure where it exactly originated from. I tried to figure it out, but it's a cool list. It's obviously a brew. 55% win rate and a 0.31 cube rate, so anything above 30 cube rate is pretty solid. I like it. 0 Atuma. You do have the Cosmo to protect all your chonky boys, right? You got all those 10 drops, 10 power cards, I should say, which really benefits Scar. I like the inclusion of Professor X here as well. I would sleep better at night if I had something like a Daredevil in this type of deck, but albeit you have Jeff, you have all these huge cards, are they really going to be able to compete with you? What's interesting is Atuma will survive if you play Atuma and then Professor X on top of the Atuma. That's pretty notable as well. Echo as a tech against Miss Marvel, which continues to be extremely popular. A very interesting deck, one that I piloted a couple times. I thought it was really fun, and there's nothing better than just putting absolute massive power on the board, and these are the chonkiest 4-drops you can get, and Zabu makes it a possibility. Also, I just realized, I said in the last deck, hey, if Zabu's in the deck, Shang-Chi's there for sure, and this deck does not have Shang-Chi and it has Zabu, so I'm already wrong. Let's move on to deck number 8, and it's a Zabu Ray Bill, 55% win rate, 0.32 cube rate. This is the deck that I brewed when Beta Ray Bill came out, and I gotta tell you, it's been one of my absolute favorite and one of my go-tos for a while. Now, because of the, I guess, familiarity people are starting to have with the deck and how you can pretty much math out what Beta Ray Bill is gonna do when you see that Jane Foster come out on turn 5, the deck has a lower cube equity than it used to. The win rate's still pretty good, but I think people are kind of starting to expect it a little bit. This deck does perform slightly better in Conquest, where the Spider Ham can really do work in that particular kind of situation where you're able to disrupt on a frequent basis. Regardless, still a very strong deck. Number 8 in the current meta, still a strong win rate of 55%. Just the cube equity is coming down ever so slightly, but still a pretty damn good choice. Going on to number 7, we have Lockdown Kinda. Honestly, it's the same Lockdown deck. It's the same Jessica Jones Storm Alioth deck that's been around forever with Medusa. But every time I call it Lockdown, people get mad in the comments because they're like, it's not Lockdown, it's something else. And I call it Location Control. People are like, you only got one card for locations. I'm like, man, I don't know what to name it. So I'm going Location Kinda. If you guys got better suggestions, let me know in the comments what you would name this thing. But regardless, 55% win rate. What ranks this one higher than the rest is it has higher cube equity at 0.36. I think a major contributor to this is Alioth. Alioth continues to catch people by surprise, despite, honestly, if you see Medusa, you just got to expect that Alioth. You see this Storm, Jessica Jones style lockdown play, you know Alioth is coming. Medusa tends to be one of the big telltales of that, okay? So just be very wary of Alioth as you try to rank up, because I am unfortunately catching a lot of people by surprise. People are going into games where they're literally unwinnable because of Alioth, and they go into them anyway, which is, it's kind of sad. I don't know if Alioth should be doing that. That is a whole other discussion in and of itself. But regardless, it's the truth. Number 7, Lockdown Kinda. We go on to number 6, and this one was so weird. I almost didn't want to include it, but the stats don't lie. And it's my job to report on the meta. This is Love Surfer, and what this is doing is it's taking advantage of the current what's it called? The event, the love event, where people are getting +2, like Agent 13 and Captain America are getting +2, and Invisible Woman's getting buffed with Mr. Fantastic, and whatever. And Gambit and Rogue, of course. And it's taking advantage of that with Surfer. To see a Killmonger deck without like Nova and like no Sebastian Shaw, like this whole deck feels sus. Like I was playing it, I didn't like it at all. But if you want to try it, it's 56% win rate. You can't lie about that. It's pretty damn solid. It's just the cube equity is pretty low. Anything in the 20s starts to get a little suspect. And I didn't like the deck, but hey, it's my job to report on the meta. This one's a climber. It's 56% win rate, and it's kind of new and interesting. So during the event, hey, why not give it a shot? I just think it's a little weird as a Surfer enjoyer myself, but hey, that's just me. Maybe you'll love it. And then we go on to Destroy. This is just straight up classic Destroy. Nothing fancy here as it has been for the last couple months. And honestly, it's just a good deck. It continues to be a good deck. It's kind of like the baseline for Snap. It's kind of fitting that it's at number 5 right now at a 56% win rate. And I mean, in the low 30s for cube rate, because that is kind of where all really good decks should be. And Destroy is so just synonymous with Marvel Snap. It is just like one of those archetypes that is forever belonging in the game, that it's kind of interesting to see how it's doing, right? We get some like novel archetypes that kind of surpass 60%, but if Destroy is kind of like the barometer for OP-ness, then it's definitely doing well at 56%. It continues to be one of the most popular in the meta from pure meta share perspective, at about 9% of the current meta. So it's still one of the most popular decks in the game. Moving on to number 4, we have Super Lockdown. This one here is actually a lockdown deck. Maybe it's not actually. I don't know. Again, tell me in the comments what you think. But I'm calling it Super Lockdown because it's Supergiant's version of kind of the prior deck. This version does run Iceman and Claw, which I thought was really interesting. A very similar shell with some modifications in order to kind of take advantage of the Supergiant play. I do like Claw. It is sneaky interesting. And once again, as always, Supergiant continues to be a very good card, in particular against specific style of decks. It tends to be good against any deck that runs Leech, any deck that runs the kind of Jane Foster base package, which is what taken a little bit off of the Beta Ray Bill, because Supergiant is kind of interesting. It's kind of good. It's not being used primarily for offensive capabilities in this particular deck. It's more of a defensive card, but still at a 0.41 cube rate, you can't argue with its performance. The deck is putting up numbers, and it's currently outperforming the other version that we saw prior. So I want to give it a shout out here as number 4. Then we go to number 3, and it's Thanos Lockjaw, and guess what? Call Obsidian is in the list. We have Kyera, we have Call Obsidian. Ironically, cut from this list is Black Swan, and of course the Supergiant. Supergiant and Black Swan were in last week's version, but I mean, with Call Obsidian, it just makes more sense to have that straight up power. And what's interesting about Call Obsidian is even if it gets Shun-Chi'd, it kind of feels like it's done its job, right? Like it gets Shun-Chi'd, but you still have Devil Dinosaur. Blob is now protected. You have Scar, Magneto. So there's so many options and so much power in this deck that really, and you have your own Shang-Chi, Call Obsidian does the job. Now, naturally, you do have Kyera, which helps to protect your 6 drops, but it doesn't protect Call Obsidian despite the amount of power it puts up. Thankfully, it will protect Scar, which can come out for a discounted rate. Regardless, Thanos Lockjaw, 57% and a 0.35 cube equity there. It's a good deck. It's a good deck. It has been for the longest time, and it continues to be. It's good to see Psylocke making its way back in, by the way, which is kind of interesting from that perspective as well. Then we go to number 2. It's Omega Hawk. This is a newcomer to the top 10. We have a 58% win rate and a 0.33 cube rate. All of these stats are post-infinite, by the way. And it's a Zabu Darkhawk based deck that includes Omega Red with Call Obsidian. The advantage to this right here is that you simply have a super powerful card in Call Obsidian, and you have the Nightcrawler, as I suggested in my video where I covered Call Obsidian, that Nightcrawler is a fantastic card to play alongside Call Obsidian for the simple reason that the move prior to playing Call Obsidian actually counts. So if you move Nightcrawler to another location, you can play Call Obsidian into that location where Nightcrawler has moved prior to the turn beginning. So that is very, very helpful for creating some flexibility in how you can play Call Obsidian. And naturally, Call Obsidian into Omega Red provides you with a lot of verticality, which prevents you from dropping that Omega Red +3 buff across the board, right? So you just got to be winning the location now. So honestly, a pretty interesting deck at 58% win rate, one of the best in the meta. But we got a surprise champion of the meta right now, a deck that's making a massive comeback, and it's Debuff Evo. This has been one of my favorite archetypes for the longest time, and the buff to Luke Cage you'd think would have taken it down, but instead what it's done is it brought back Man-Thing. We have this Man-Thing version of this deck, and this deck has a relatively low play rate, but an extraordinary high win rate, which I just realized I typoed. That is a 60% win rate, not a 55. I forgot to change that. 60% win rate, 0.49 cube rate, that's accurate. And what's interesting about this is that it's just debuff Evo, right? So you can sneak out the Abomination, but the Moon Girl side of it is really interesting. You have Zabu. If you Moon Girl early, you have multiple Man-Things. You have the Luke Cage you can play. And what's interesting is you're not running the magic. So it's a very different playstyle here. And it's cool to see Wasp once again being played in order to debuff a card to get that Abomination out for free. So a really interesting approach to high Evo, because when people see these high Evo cards, they might be assuming magic, skip turns, but this doesn't do that at all. It's a very aggressive, we're going to out-trade you in 6 turns type deck. And I'm all for it. I think it's really fascinating. Regardless, guys, thank you so much for all your support and for watching this video. Thank you for hitting the like button, and we'll see you on that next Marvel Snap video.